Okay, so after you've looked at parts one, two, and three of the setup for the midterm, which is stacked walls, I'm going to show you how to practice, do a practice run so that you're prepared for the midterm. Because you have 3 hours and 20 minutes, which if you know what you're doing, that's plenty of time. If you don't know what you're doing, that will not be anywhere near enough time. But the idea is to be set up and ready to go with by following step one, step two, and step three, or part one, part two, and part three of the videos that I've uploaded for you. So assuming that you've done parts one and two and three, and you have something called midterm, a project called that, let's just save it as another project. You don't want to mess up your original project, but let's save it as sample or test or something like that. So we don't destroy our original exam uh, beginning or setup, but let's say that this will look exactly like yours that you'll bring into the exam, but I'm going to have to change it a little bit. So we don't want to mess up the original. So now we have the sample. So what you will be provided with at the beginning of the midterm exam are some wall types like this, okay? And it will tell you what the material of the wall is and what the thickness of that wall is, all of the materials. And this is wall type 4A. This is 5. And we just make it basement wall. And then 1, 2, 4. Here's 3. Okay. So basement wall 3, 2, and 4. Okay, so we have them all. So you'll get something like this in a PDF form that you can refer to. And this exam is online. If you have the ability to work someplace that has multiple monitors, that would be beneficial, but not impossible to work on a single monitor. But 2 monitors, you could have this information on one monitor and work on the other one. So let's take a look at our basic wall. We'll start from wall 1. Let's find that guy. We'll just work our way through it. Where is that one? 3. Basement wall. Oh, the basement wall is wall 1. Okay. So what is that? Well, that is concrete cast in place, 1 foot thick. So if you only have one monitor, you might do this instead. WT will give you toggling of the information. And then step 1 would be to change the wall types. Okay, so we've already made all of these wall types. So let's say that wall type A is your basic wall. So we simply click on this wall, edit the type, edit the structure, and now we need to make this basic wall, which only has structure. Remember, we have to always have something between the core boundaries, so we have our structure there. So we don't need number 1, we can delete it. We don't need number 2, we can delete it. We don't need number 4, we can delete it. All we want is one in the middle, concrete cast in place. Let's make this a little bit bigger here. So we'll stretch this out so we can see this a little bit better. Okay, then what do we want this to be? Concrete cast in place. So we'll search in the search box there and look for concrete. concrete cast in place. Okay, that's the material. How thick is it? Well, it's a foot thick, so we just type 1. And basically, for this one, we've modified wall A to look like that. And say, okay, and look at what happens. It changes wall type A to our basic wall. And now let's go to wall type 2, and we'll do the exact same thing to B. We're going to say B has to be wall type 2. Edit the type, duplicate. No, we're not duplicating it. We're changing it now. The first one is a finish and it's brick common. So let's fix that. We go to the library. We're searching for brick. Brick common. Okay. How thick is it? 4 inches. So we'll change that to 4 inches. The second one is thermal air. So that is a thermal air. Let's change the function, thermal air. And we'll go to the library and we're looking for air, A-I-R. There it is. Okay. The next one is the structure, which is concrete cast in place. So again, we're going to look for concrete cast in place as the material, C-O-N-C. Let's see what comes up in our library. Concrete cast in place. Okay. And that's it. So this wall has thermal air, brick, air, and concrete. Okay. Brick, air, and concrete. So this one we don't need. So we delete it. And we didn't pay attention to the thickness. So let's go back and check our thicknesses now. The brick is 4 inches thick. The air is 1 inch thick. The concrete is 7 inches thick. And that's it. We've got all of our, we're calling it wall type B. It looks like wall type 2. And I think we're in good shape here. Let's take a look at it. We'll say, okay, okay. Look what happened. We've changed wall type B to look like that. Wall type C. And remember, this is just the section through these walls that you put on the, this is this section right here. Just remember, we put a section through all of our wall types that we pre-made. Now we're just modifying them. So we got to go to C now, which we'll say is 3. That one's 4. There's 3. So let's look at 3. And we'll click on this wall type, edit the type, edit the structure, and we'll duplicate this. So finish 1 is brick common. That's the material. We'll search the library for brick. Brick common, okay. The next one is air. So we have air. The next one is rigid insulation. So we can change this one to rigid insulation. R-I-G-I-D. We'll search the library for that material. There it is. We'll say okay. And we need plywood sheathing. So we need another material. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 materials, and then the core boundaries. So we need one more. So we just say insert, and we're looking for this one now. Substrate. Let's change it to substrate. And let's change it to plywood sheathing. So we click the 3 dots and we're looking for plywood. See what comes up with just typing PLY. I just double clicked it instead of hitting the OK. And let's move our core boundaries just so that they match. So we want the one on the bottom, so we can highlight it and just click like that. And then we want one above the substrate, so we'll highlight that, and we have this down button. Okay, so what does it look like? 4 inches, Nope, we have to change that. Air is 1 inch, so we need to change that. And the rigid insulation, where'd the plywood? Ah, so we need to move some things here. We're not correctly oriented, which is fine. Up. Oh, we can't move it up because that would take everything out of the core boundary. So let's move the plywood down first so that we have something left between the core boundaries when we move the rigid insulation up. So we've selected the rigid insulation. We can go up with that. And rigid insulation is a substrate. So let's do that. So the brick is 4 inches, brick is 4 inches, air is 1 inch, air is 1 inch, rigid insulation is 1 inch. Okay, let's fix that. Oh, that still might work, but we'll do it right. Okay. And then the plywood sheathing is 3/4 of an inch. I think we're good. So what do we do? Right. We say, okay. So it's telling us that row 3 has a problem. Layer function priorities. Okay, so let's go to 3. And we should maybe make that substrate 1. Let's see if that makes a difference. We don't have a substrate 1. Okay. Let's change air to a thermal air layer. Just see if that did it. Yeah, it did. Okay. So now if we look at C, our C is brick, air, rigid insulation, plywood. Brick, air, rigid insulation, plywood. Okay. So that looks good. And let's take a look at D. So D would be 4, A, B, C, D. Here's 4. We'll change 4 to look like, we'll change D to look like what I'm calling is type 4. So let's change D to match this. So we've highlighted D. D is up here in the properties. We're going to edit the type. And then we're going to duplicate. No, we're not duplicating. We're just changing it to edit. So now we're looking at brick common. So we'll hit the double. We'll hit the triple dots. And we're looking for brick. B-R-I-C-K. Brick common is what we want. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Air is the next one. So let's change that to air. Now I think we could type in based upon the wording here, because that is the ones that Revit recognizes. But if you spelled this type slightly wrong or forgot, say for example, it looks like there's a comma there, Revit wouldn't understand it or recognize it. And so that's why I go back to the library and search, because that gives us an opportunity to make sure that we get it right. So we have brick, air, rigid insulation, brick, air. Okay, rigid insulation will be the third one. One, two, three, four. Now we got plywood sheathing. So we know we can move these around up and down later. So we'll continue with this. PLY is our search criteria for everything in the library that has PLY in it. And it found it. We say okay to that. And then we need softwood lumber. So we'll make this one our softwood lumber. And we'll search for that, SOFT, and see what comes up in the library for that. And we'll say okay. And then we need another one. We need that gypsum wallboard. So we hit insert, and that's our gypsum wallboard. So we'll type GYP. Remember that the cursor defaults up to here, so you don't even have to click in there. It's already expecting us to type something in there. So we're typing GYP for gypsum wallboard. We'll say okay. And then we're good. In terms of the materials, but we have to put them in order now. Brick, air, rigid insulation, plywood sheathing. Let's move this down. And let's move this down just to match what we're seeing here. And then we need to move this up. And we need to move this down. Okay, now let's double check. Brick, air, rigid insulation. Brick, air, rigid insulation. Plywood, softwood, gypsum. Plywood, softwood, gypsum. Okay, now let's double check our thicknesses. 4 inches. And then 1 inch. And then 1/2. Nope. And then 1 inch again. And then 3/4 for the plywood. Let's do that. And then the softwood lumber is 5.5. So we'll just change that right there to 5. And the gypsum wallboard. Now let's see if we didn't fix this one. If it left it at 0 feet, 0 inches, Revit would say there's a problem. So we want to make sure we do that before we try to save it. All right. Finish. Yeah. Thermal. Let's call that a thermal layer. Substrate, 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 substrate. Again, it could be structure though. Plywood sheathing could be structure. It does not carry a vertical load, but it does carry a horizontal forces. It does resist the horizontal forces so that the frame of the house doesn't move sideways. Softwood lumber is 5.5. Gypsum board, finish and structure. Finishes. Okay, I think we're good on wall D. And we'll say okay. And you can see how that changed. Wall D changed. Okay. Now, what's wall E supposed to be? That would be A, B, C, D, E. That would be number 5. What did we do here? Oh, that was 4. Okay, so now we're looking for 5. I guess we have to go to the other wall type sheet for number 5. And there it is. Okay. And we're going to make E. A, B, C, D, E. Yep. Okay. Edit the type. We don't duplicate it. We could, but we don't have to. We could duplicate it and call it A, but there's already an A. So we, or an E, an E. Yeah, we're just changing E, so we don't need to duplicate it. We're actually changing wall type E now in our sample project, not your midterm project, which you've already created and you want to leave it the way it is because you're not going to change them this way. You're going to change those, whatever you receive on at the beginning of the midterm. All right, so what are we looking at here? We've got 5E. What are we looking for? We're looking for rigid insulation would be the first one. RIGID. And then we've got plywood sheathing. PLY. Okay. And then we have gypsum wallboard. No, we have softwood lumber. Let's get that in there. SOFT. Okay. What's next? Gypsum wallboard. Uh-oh, we don't have enough, so we'll insert another one and we'll call it gypsum wallboard. GYP. Now let's look at the thicknesses. The rigid insulation is 1 inch thick, 1 inch. The plywood sheathing is 3/4. The softwood lumber is 5.5. So we can change that to 5. And the gypsum wallboard is 5/8. So we'll just come in there 5/8. And they're not in the right order. So we'll take our gypsum wallboard, highlight it, and say move it down. What do we got? Rigid, plywood, softwood, gypsum. Rigid, plywood, softwood, gypsum. Okay, now the core boundary, just to duplicate what we have there, although it's not necessary for this, we'll do that. And the core boundary is all the way up at the top. So we'll do that just to duplicate it. I think we're good. Okay. And so we just changed E like that. And I think we have one more. No, it's 4A. Okay, so we'll make that F. Okay. F, edit the type. Well, I think I need to be able to see all of that. So we want to move it. Now I can make one window bigger than the other. So let's do that. And then F, edit the type, and we're going to make it whatever 4A is. Edit the type. Softwood lumber is the first one. So we'll go search for that. The next one is, another softwood lumber, 4 inches. So let's insert another one. And we'll put in another softwood lumber. Okay. Softwood, rigid insulation. We'll change this one to rigid insulation. What else? Plywood sheathing. We'll change this to plywood sheathing. We have softwood lumber and gypsum wallboard, but we don't have any more. So we'll insert, and we'll say, let's do the gypsum. All right. And I might have made a mistake. Let's see. Softwood lumber. Yes. Rigid insulation. Yes. Plywood sheathing. That's the one we didn't make yet. Okay, so let's do, no, we have it right here. Okay. So let's put them in order just to make sure I'm not confused here. Softwood lumber, rigid insulation, plywood sheathing. So that plywood sheathing, we want to move it up underneath the rigid insulation. Then we want softwood lumber. Again, that's the one we don't have, so let's make it again. And then the gypsum wallboard. So I'm going to highlight that and say down. So we should be in the right order now. So softwood lumber is a substrate and another substrate and another substrate, which is the rigid insulation. And then we have structure for the plywood. And then we have gypsum wallboard. No, structure is for the softwood lumber. Yep, and then gypsum wallboard, which is finish. get that right? Softwood, 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 rigid, no, soft, yeah, rigid, plywood, softwood, gypsum board. Okay, so where's the core boundaries between the softwood lumber? So we'll highlight this and we'll just say down. And then we'll highlight this one and we'll just say down. Now let's check the thicknesses. 1, 4, and 1 inch, 4 inches, 1 inch, 3/4 for the plywood. Softwood lumber, 5.5. We can also type 5.5. And then the gypsum wallboard is 5/8. Okay. So we have extra walls that we don't have to worry about for this example. And we're pretty good there. Let's go to our legend real quick. This one? Yeah, look at that. This needs to be displayed in fine resolution. It's only concrete. Yeah, so that's the only thing that's there. So we can delete these, but we're going to do that later anyway. But our wall A is the concrete, our wall B. So it automatically changed the wall types to what we created. So we're in pretty good shape. I think this is a good spot to stop. And then we'll do a second part to this once you get through here. If you want to practice, you're not required to do this. There's no submission here. But if you want to practice, I'm walking you through baby steps through how to take the midterm.